I want you to picture a family reunion photograph. 40-something people arranged on a wide stone staircase outside a rented lake house. Grandparents seated in the front row. Children cross-legged on the grass. 3 generations of one family, dressed in matching navy and white, smiling for the camera. Now picture one person standing just outside the frame. Not because she wandered off. Not because she arrived late. Because someone specifically, deliberately, asked her to step aside. That's where this story starts. Not with a will, not with a lawyer's office, not with money at all. With a photograph. With the exact moment a woman realized that after 11 years of marriage into a family, they still did not consider her one of them. And with the decision she quietly made, standing on that lawn, about what to do with that information. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what was in the envelope that arrived at my brother-in-law's house 14 months later. Stick around. This one is slow and surgical. Welcome back to Blood and Backbone, where we talk about the moments families don't put in the holiday newsletter. If you're new here, these stories are dramatized for entertainment, but the kind of exclusion you're about to hear, that part is real for more people than you'd think. If it's real for you too, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Let's call her June. 44 years old, a high school art teacher, married for 11 years to a man named Roy, who came from a large, loud, deeply entangled family that had strong opinions about everything from politics to the correct way to carve a turkey. June had known, from roughly the 3rd family dinner she ever attended, that she was not exactly what Roy's family had imagined for him. This was never said directly, of course. Families like this rarely say the direct thing. Instead it came through in a dozen small, deniable ways over 11 years. The way Roy's mother, Eleanor, always referred to June's job as her little art thing, never quite managing to call it teaching. The way June's name was consistently left off group texts about family plans, only added after Roy noticed and said something. The way the family had a shorthand, a shared vocabulary of inside jokes and old stories, that 11 years in, June still found herself on the outside of, nodding along while understanding perhaps a third of what was being referenced. None of it was a smoking gun. All of it, added together, over 11 years, was a portrait. June had made a kind of peace with it, the way people who love someone often make peace with the parts of that person's life that don't entirely include them. She focused on what was genuinely good, her relationship with Roy, who was warm and attentive and had never once made her feel like an outsider in their own home, a few of the younger cousins who treated her like family without any apparent effort. The lake house reunions themselves, which were, objectively, beautiful regardless of the social dynamics inside them. She had reached what she described to a close friend as a stable unhappiness, not miserable, not thriving, just quietly managing something she'd more or less accepted as permanent. Then came the summer of the photograph, and something that had been stable for 11 years became suddenly, completely unstable. The reunion that year was the largest one the family had held in over a decade. Eleanor had rented a 5-bedroom lake house for a long weekend and invited every branch of the family tree, cousins twice removed, elderly aunts who had to be driven in from 2 states over, people June had met once at a funeral 7 years ago and had never seen since. The matching outfits had been Eleanor's idea, navy and white, coordinated in advance, purchased as a family bulk order through a cousin who did embroidery. June's name had, once again, been left off the original order. Roy caught it and added her, but her shirt arrived in the wrong size because the order had already been submitted once and her addition was treated as an afterthought rather than a correction. She wore it anyway, rolled the sleeves, made it work, the way she always made things work. The photograph itself was organized on the afternoon of the second day by Eleanor's eldest son, a man named Gerald who treated every family event as a mild military operation and had opinions about things like optimal sun angles and symmetry of groupings. He spent 20 minutes arranging people on the stone staircase outside the house. Grandparents seated. Parents standing behind. Teenagers to one side. Small children on the grass. Roy took his place in the second row, reached back to draw June up beside him. And Gerald, without lowering his voice, without any particular hesitation, said, "Actually, let's keep it blood family for this one. June, do you mind?" June stood there for a moment. Roy went very still beside her. Nobody else said anything. Nobody objected. Nobody said, "Wait, that's not right." Nobody stepped out of the frame in solidarity. They just waited, 40-something people in matching navy and white, for June to step aside so the picture could be taken. She stepped aside. She walked back to the deck, sat down in a chair with her back to the staircase, and listened to the photographer counting down while 38 people smiled without her. Roy came to find her afterward, face dark, and said he was sorry. She told him it was fine. She told everyone it was fine for the rest of the weekend, the way she always told everyone everything was fine, and then she drove home on Sunday afternoon and sat in the kitchen for a long time after Roy went to bed, thinking about a word that had been forming in the back of her mind for 11 years and had finally, that afternoon, become unavoidable. Done. Not done with Roy. Not done with the family entirely. Just done pretending the portrait she'd been looking at for 11 years was something other than what it was. And done, more specifically, with a particular arrangement she had put in place 4 years earlier and never gotten around to revisiting. June, as it happened, had money. Not a spectacular amount, but significantly more than Roy's family knew or suspected, because June had the particular financial superpower of people who are treated as unimportant, which is that nobody ever asks them about their finances. She had inherited a modest sum from her own parents when they passed, invested it conservatively and consistently for a decade, and supplemented it with 11 years of a teacher's salary spent by someone with genuinely simple tastes and no particular interest in impressing people who didn't respect her anyway. She also owned, outright, a small rental property her parents had left her, a 2-bedroom house in a town 2 hours away that generated quiet, reliable income 12 months a year. 4 years earlier, in a period of what she now recognized as misplaced optimism, June had updated her will in a way that included Roy's family in her estate. Not lavishly, but meaningfully. Eleanor was listed as a secondary beneficiary for a specific portion. Gerald's 2 children, Roy's niece and nephew, were included in a modest trust intended for their education. It had felt, at the time, like an olive branch. Like a way of saying, I am committed to this family even when the feeling isn't entirely mutual. Standing on that lawn while 38 people smiled without her, June decided it was time to revise her olive branch. She didn't call a lawyer that week. She didn't make any sudden moves, because June had spent 11 years learning that the most powerful thing she could do in any situation involving this family was remain completely calm and give absolutely nothing away. She went back to school in September. She brought Eleanor a birthday gift in October. She attended Thanksgiving and helped with the dishes and told Roy's mother the sweet potato casserole was delicious, which it genuinely was, because June was not a person who lied about food even when she was quietly rearranging her entire estate plan in the background. She met with her estate attorney in November, on a Tuesday afternoon, while Roy was at work. The conversation was professional and straightforward. She removed Eleanor from her will entirely. She removed Gerald's children from the educational trust and redirected those funds to a scholarship program at the high school where she taught. She reviewed her rental property documentation and confirmed that it would pass, upon her death, entirely to Roy, with no secondary claims from any other family member. The revised will was signed, witnessed, and filed before Thanksgiving dinner was fully digested. She told Roy about it in January, quietly, on a Sunday morning over coffee, because she believed he had a right to know even if the details were hers to decide. She showed him the photograph first. The one from the reunion, the official one Eleanor had printed and framed and sent to every household in the family as a Christmas gift that year, navy and white, stone staircase, 38 smiling people. Do you see anyone missing? Roy looked at the photograph for a long time. June. 11 years, she said. That's how long I've been in this family. And I'm not in that photograph because Gerald asked me to step out and nobody said a word. Roy set the photograph down. His voice, when he found it, was quiet and a little rough. I should have stepped out with you. You should have, she agreed. But that's not the point I'm making right now. She told him about the will revision calmly, without drama, the way she told him most important things. She wasn't leaving him. She wasn't asking him to cut off his family. She was simply making decisions about her own estate that reflected her actual relationships, and her actual relationship with his family was one in which she could be removed from a photograph without a single person objecting. Roy was quiet for a long time. He didn't argue with the logic of it. He asked if Eleanor knew. June said no, and she didn't intend to tell her. Roy nodded slowly. She will eventually. Eventually is fine, June said. Eventually is the whole point. Eleanor found out 14 months after the reunion photograph, not because June told her, but because Eleanor, at 71, had begun having gentle conversations with family members about estate planning in that way older people sometimes do, half practical, half sentimental, checking in on who'd thought about what, making sure everyone understood the arrangements. She called June directly one afternoon, cheerful and chatty, mentioning that she'd been going over some of her own documents and wanted to make sure June's were all in order as well, with the particular tone of someone who assumed they already knew the answer. June told her, calmly and without embellishment, that she had revised her documents about a year ago and everything was in order. Eleanor asked, still light, whether the educational trust for Gerald's children was still intact. June said she'd redirected those funds to a scholarship at her school. Eleanor went quiet. And the rest? June told her. Not unkindly. Not triumphantly. Simply clearly, the way she said most things. Eleanor's response moved through several stages in the space of about 90 seconds, surprise, confusion, and then something June recognized from 11 years of careful observation as the particular indignation of someone who had never genuinely expected consequences. I don't understand why you do this to the family. June had thought about how she would answer this question for 14 months, because she had always known it was coming, and she'd wanted to have the right words when it arrived. I'm not doing anything to the family, Eleanor. I'm making decisions about my own estate that reflect my relationships honestly. I've been part of this family for 11 years. I helped with dishes at every holiday. I learned everyone's food allergies and their birthday months and the names of their children. And at the reunion last summer, Gerald asked me to step out of the family photograph, and not one person said a word. Not one. So I went back to my documents and I made sure they reflected the family I actually have, rather than the one I was hoping for. I think that's fair. There was a long silence. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice had shifted, some of the indignation replaced by something more complicated. Gerald shouldn't have done that. No, June said. He shouldn't have. It was not an apology. It was not an admission that 11 years had been mishandled in ways that mattered. But it was the first time Eleanor had ever said, plainly and without qualification, that something done to June had been wrong. It was also, notably, the first time June had ever heard it without having asked for it. June and Roy are still married. The family dynamics are different now, not warmer exactly, but more honest. The way things sometimes get more honest when consequences become real and people stop being able to pretend a situation is one thing when the documents say another. Gerald has not spoken to June directly since the conversation became family knowledge. Eleanor sends birthday cards now, something she never consistently did before. The photograph is still on the wall at the lake house. June knows because Roy told her. She hasn't been back to see it. She doesn't need to. She knows exactly who's in it and exactly who isn't, and she knows, now, that the person who's missing turned out to matter quite a lot more than the frame ever suggested. Here's what I keep coming back to with this one. June didn't get loud. She didn't stage a confrontation, she didn't demand an apology, she didn't make the reunion photograph into a public incident. She just took the information she was given on that lawn, the clearest, most honest thing that family had ever communicated to her in 11 years, and she made sure her own documents were equally honest in return. Sometimes the most powerful response to being told where you stand is making sure everything you control reflects exactly the same clarity. If this story hit close to home for you, drop a comment and tell me about a moment when a family finally showed you exactly where you stood. And if you want more stories like this one, I've got a new one coming this week. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next story.